I hope that they'll look at other programs to reduce their costs.
Because business is not something that you had an impact on.
I don't have control over which programs they're doing, but if they have fewer applicants coming into their universities and they realize part of the reason is because their cost is too high, they will lower those costs.
I don't think that is how it works.
It is exactly how it works.
That is not how it works.
It is supply,
your
it is supply
specific
and
job
demand. It is supply
your
and
specific
demand.
job is to try to make sure, as the head of the Department of Education, to make education accessible for Americans. When you create policies that make education unreachable for Americans that want that education, then you are failing at your job.
I now recognize the gentlelady from Minnesota, Ms. Omar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, sorry to belabor this. I know so many people on both sides of the aisle have asked you about the department's decision to remove nursing, teaching, social work, and other critical occupations from the definition of professional degrees and capping their ability to receive federal loans. I know that in my home state of Minnesota, we're expecting to face a shortage of 30,000 nurses in the next 4 years. And I know that your home state of North Carolina, it is expected to see a shortage of 13,000. Our nurses obviously are limited in their capacity, they're overworked, and they're worried. So I know you said the decision is final, but I'm just trying to figure out if you can answer, why did you move forward with an action that you know is going to be creating a problem or worsening a problem that already exists?
Well, first of all, let me correct one thing. We did not remove any of these professions from a professional category. They were never characterized in the law, in the statute, as a professional category. So as these caps were put into place, and many professions were then being reviewed as to what constituted a professional category, guided by the definition of a professional degree from Congress. So that was the overview that we looked at as we were writing this new rulemaking, with the overall goal of putting caps in place that are going to reduce the cost of college.
How is that happening?
Well, I have a couple of articles here already that there are colleges.
What do they say?
They are saying that they are looking at reducing the cost of their graduate programs.
I know, but looking is not addressing the problem that we're currently seeing. What I am asking you is that you've made a decision that is currently making the problem worse.
That is not correct. Let me push back on that.
Are you saying the numbers in Minnesota that we're seeing or in North Carolina are not real?
Well, what I'm saying to you is there are shortages in those states, primarily in the undergraduate nursing program, which is not affected by this new rule and this new cap. Undergraduate programs are not affected at all by this cap.
I know, but
These are only graduate programs, so the shortage is not a result of this cap being put on. The shortage of nursing is that we don't have enough applicants into the nursing programs that are coming through our universities.
So instead of helping with the problem, you've decided to make it worse?
I don't think you ran when I talked about another way to get to an RN, an expedited program. You can get a 2-year certificate and then take the exam to become an RN.
My sisters are nurses. I do know how those things work. I'm asking you about the specific classification that you created that lowers the cap.
We didn't remove them from a professional designation.
I know, but address the cap issue when it comes to the
I just did, because I said it does not impact.
But you said you were trying to lower the cost of tuition. How does that happen?
Because there are already colleges that are lowering the cost of their graduate programs because
what are those colleges?
There's a college in California, University of California in Irvine, and Purdue University in Indiana.
And is it for business or for nursing?
They have lowered them right now and for their business programs.
Yeah, but we're talking about nursing, ma'am.
Well, I hope that they'll look at other programs to reduce their costs.
Business is not something that you had an impact on.
I don't have control over which programs they're doing, but if they have fewer applicants coming into their universities and they realize part of the reason is because their cost is too high, they will lower those costs.
I don't think that is how it works.
It is exactly how it works.
That is not how it works.
It is
Your
supply
specific
and
job
demand. It is supply
your
and
specific
demand.
job is to try to make sure, as the head of the Department of Education, to make education accessible for Americans. When you create policies that make education unreachable for Americans that want that education, then you are failing at your job.
No, when there have not been caps on programs and universities have been allowed to charge whatever they wanted, and the student loan program allowed them to borrow up to whatever that university said was the cost, it was time to take action and to put caps in place that are going to
but your caps only create a funnel through the private borrowing system.
That's not true.
Yes, that is what it will do. How else
It's
would somebody, if
putting the
I wanted to get a professional degree and I'm capped and I can't borrow, then I have to, from a public source, then I have to go private. And that is what your administration is really trying to do, is trying to help enrich others on the backs of the American people. I yield back.
All right, everyone, grab your notes and settle in. Because what we are breaking down today is an absolute ideological war zone inside the House Education Committee. We're watching Representative Ilhan Omar go toe-to-toe with the new Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, in a 2026 battle over the future of how Americans pay for graduate school. This isn't just your standard political bickering. This hearing exposes a massive, fundamental shift in federal policy regarding the student loan system, higher education funding, and public health infrastructure. On one side, you have the progressive view that the federal government needs to subsidize critical professions to prevent catastrophic workforce shortages. On the other side, you have the new administration's free market shock therapy policy, which believes the only way to stop the runaway train of college tuition inflation is to slam a hard cap on federal lending and force universities to lower their prices. Let's do an educational deep dive into the core of the dispute, the graduate loan cap policy. For years, graduate students could use federal Grad Plus loans to borrow up to the total cost of attendance determined by their university. Omar opens her interrogation by holding McMahon's feet to the fire regarding the department's decision to exclude critical fields like nursing, teaching, and social work from the specialized professional degree designation. By keeping them out of that designation, graduate students in these fields are hit with a strict federal loan cap. Omar comes armed with devastating receipts from her home state of Minnesota, which is projecting a massive shortage of 30,000 nurses over the next 4 years. She notes that North Carolina, McMahon's home turf, is facing a deficit of 13,000. Omar's argument is simple and narrative-driven. These professions are already burning out, overworked, and underpaid. If you cut off their ability to borrow federal funds to get advanced degrees, like becoming a nurse practitioner or a nurse educator, you are systematically starving the supply line of advanced healthcare professionals exactly when the country is on the brink of a collapse. But look at how Secretary McMahon pivots. This is where the macroeconomics of the 2026 Department of Education come to light. McMahon pushes back hard, executing a legalistic defense. She points out that the department didn't technically remove nursing or social work from a professional category, because Congress never explicitly defined them as such in the original statute. McMahon is leaning heavily on administrative strictness. More importantly, McMahon drops a critical piece of data that shifts the blame back onto the universities. She states that the vast majority of the nursing shortages Omar is talking about exist at the undergraduate level, the Bachelor of Science in Nursing, BSN, programs, which are completely untouched by these new graduate loan caps. To McMahon, the nursing shortage is an applicant problem, not a lending problem. She even tries to lecture Omar on alternative, accelerated pathways, suggesting people get 2-year associate certificates instead of expensive graduate degrees. Now, watch the screen at the 2-minute mark, because this is where the debate turns into a masterclass in economic theory and political theater. Omar asks the golden question: how does capping federal loans actually lower the cost of tuition? McMahon confidently asserts that the market is already responding. She claims universities are actively looking at reducing the cost of their graduate programs because they realize the federal spigot has been turned off. But when Omar traps her and demands specific names, what are those colleges? McMahon lists UC Irvine in California and Purdue University in Indiana. And here comes the punchline. Omar asks, is it for business or for nursing? McMahon is forced to admit that the tuition cuts she's bragging about are only happening in business programs. This is the weakest point of McMahon's testimony, and Omar jumps on it like a hawk. Business schools operate on entirely different financial models than nursing, teaching, or social work programs. Corporate MBAs have high corporate backing and massive return on investment metrics. Nursing and social work graduate programs are public interest fields. A master's in social work or a master's in nursing does not yield a Wall Street salary. Omar is pointing out a massive flaw in the administration's free market theory. Treating public service degrees the exact same way you treat elite corporate business degrees doesn't lower tuition, it just kills the public service programs entirely. McMahon's counterargument is the bedrock of the conservative 2026 education platform. She states that for decades, universities have had a blank check. Because the federal government allowed students to borrow up to whatever arbitrary price a university set, schools had zero incentive to lower costs. They just built luxury dorms, expanded administrative bureaucracies, and hiked tuition by 400%. McMahon's view is that the Department of Education's job isn't to fund unlimited university greed. It's to force a supply and demand correction. If schools don't have applicants because students can't get federal loans to cover the bloated tuition, the schools will be mathematically forced to lower their prices to survive. But Omar drops the final, devastating counter-theory that represents the progressive warning for the next decade, the private lending funnel. Omar argues that capping federal loans does not stop students from pursuing these degrees. It just forces them out of the highly regulated public lending system and pushes them straight into the arms of predatory private banks. When a student hits their federal cap but still needs $30,000 to finish their nurse practitioner rotation, they don't just drop out, they go to private lenders who charge astronomical, variable interest rates without any of the federal safety nets like income-driven repayment plans, deferment options, or public service loan forgiveness, PSLF. Omar delivers her closing line with pure venom, accusing the administration of intentionally creating a policy designed to enrich private financial institutions on the backs of working-class Americans looking to enter public service. This 4-minute and 50-second transcript gives us the entire blueprint of the domestic political war of 2026. On one hand, you have an administration trying to forcefully pop the higher education bubble by cutting off the money supply, believing that short-term pain will lead to long-term structural affordability. On the other hand, you have lawmakers like Omar warning that this blunt force trauma to the student loan system is going to cause immediate, collateral damage to our hospitals, our schools, and our social safety nets. As you review this footage, ask yourself who is winning the macro argument. If McMahon is right, universities across the country will soon undergo a massive tuition deflation, making graduate school affordable again without massive debt. But if Omar is right, the nursing shortage will explode, advanced education will become a luxury exclusive to the wealthy, and those brave enough to pursue it anyway will find themselves trapped in a private debt cycle with no escape hatch. This is the front line of the battle over the American mind and the American workforce. When Omar yields back her time, she isn't just finishing an interrogation. She's laying down the gauntlet for an economic struggle that will define higher education for a generation. Keep a close eye on the tuition rates of public universities over the next 12 months, because that is where we will find out if McMahon's market theory actually works, or if Omar's warning of an economic funnel to private banks comes entirely true.